Complete left arm. That's an ambitious title considering the amount of work we've got left to do on this. What I'm aiming to do in this video is to get the shoulder complete, get the bicep attached to the shoulder, get the forearm attached to the bicep forming the elbow joint, get all the covers on and complete the whole arm all the way down from the shoulder to the fingertips. There's a lot of work to do, so let's get straight into it. So I'll briefly go over the work we've got left to do. To complete this shoulder, we've got this part here that I didn't fit last time. So there's going to be another set of ball bearings to fit in here, in this piece, and then I'm not sure exactly which way around it goes, but that will then screw onto there. So I'll have to take these screws out, slip this bit on, and then put those screws back in. I think these screws are for the tension on the ball bearings, and then the fixings are actually through these holes here. So we'll need two M3 nuts in here, and then two M3 bolts, one in this side, one in the other side there, and then pop these two back in to tension the ball bearings. We'll need ball bearings and grease in that. Once that's on, I think we need to install the two potentiometers. We should really have done them last time, but I didn't get around to that. I've got them here. There's two potentiometers to fit, so there's two sets of attachments. This one's in three pieces. I believe this piece pushes into the back of the torso via this little lug here. It has a kind of a retaining space for the bolt, which is actually the nut, I should say, that goes on the end of this bolt on the other side around the back here. So there'll be a nut fitted there, and then this piece will fit onto that somehow on the back there. And then the other side of that, there is the small hole for the potentiometer to fit into. So that's one part of it. The other part attaches to the servo, and it has a round hole in here for the potentiometer, and then we have this sort of conversion bracket which converts the square hole of the potentiometer to the round hole in here. And I believe the reason it's done like that, rather than just printing a square hole directly in this part, is so that you can then orientate this however you need it for the exact calibration of the position of the potentiometer. It's quite a clever little design, so I think we need to get that calibrated into the right position, and then put a little bit of glue on it somewhere just to hold it in place. The other one's similar concept, has the same kind of adapter bracket from square to round, so that we can adjust the position. That just pops into there, and then there's this sort of dovetail joint that attaches into the shoulder piece. That again should have really have gone in before we assembled that shoulder. So we also have these parts for the shoulder. They're kind of the main bracket that attaches the bicep to the shoulder. They have dovetail joints on them, and they'll fit in onto the bicep like that. There'll be two of them, one at the front here and one at the back. When they're attached in there, they'll then also attach onto the shoulder via this piece. Once this is in position, you have these dovetail joints here. That'll attach on there, one at the front, one at the back. So once we get these fitted, that will actually attach the bicep to the shoulder. Once they're on, we then do have these lovely covers here with the My Robot Lab logos on. Regarding the bicep itself, we've got quite a bit of work left to do on this. We have these reinforcing brackets here, which I missed when we assembled this. They're supposed to go in there, which means this screw needs to come out of here, possibly need a longer screw. I think currently that screw is too long, is causing an issue on the inside. once it's fitted through here, it may well be the correct length then, or we may even need a longer screw. There's 2 of these to fit, 1 on each side. I've got them printed out ready, just need to install them. We need to sort out this cabling. This is just a real mess here. Gael pointed out to me that you can actually take one cable out each side, so we've got them both coming out this side, but we could move one to the other side. There is another hole here, so we could try that, moving one cable to each side. I'm also tempted to just cut off a little bit more of the plastic away here to make this little slot a little larger, so the cable can sit fully recessed in that. But I'll have a look. I'll get it apart and we'll have a look at that cabling. We need to take this apart because we didn't fit ball bearings. You can see this is loose and wobbly. We've got the ball bearings now, so the ball bearings can go in there. So we need to take that off, pop the ball bearings in. We need to put everything back together, and then we do have the bicep covers. They come in 3 different prints. 3 different STL files. There's these 2 here, and then there's this one. This actually came out as one STL file, but there's 2 parts to it. There's actually 2 parts to this print, and I think there's 2 parts to this. No, sorry, 4 parts to this print, and 4 parts to this print. So there's actually 4, 8, 10 pieces in total. They're essentially all in half, so we have to join the 2 halves together, kind of like this for every piece. These probably look a little bit more complicated, these other ones, but this one's pretty straightforward. That just needs to be glued together. I think they're done like that so that you can print them on a fairly small printer bed. There are alternatives available online where these are all in one piece, which may have been a better option considering I've got a fairly large print bed, but I've just gone with the standard ones from the InMoov.fr website. They should do fine. And finally, down in the forearm, last time I glued this piece on here, so this gearing should now be able to be connected up. So we should be able to put the bolt through here and here, and this should attach on there, kind of something like that. That shouldn't be too much work just to get that bolted through. I think the main time spent will be getting everything sort of calibrated and aligned, because we need to make sure the potentiometers, all the potentiometers, all need to be set up properly. Once we've got that attached, we had a few issues with the forearm. The thumb is kind of jammed at the moment. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with the thumb. We do have an issue with this finger, but I don't think I can fix that. I think I'm just going to have to live with that for now. I've got a nasty suspicion as well the thumb might suffer the same problem, where the finger was coming up but it wasn't going back down. I think the thumb may do the same. But I believe the solution is to replace this main part, which is quite a bit of rework, so I don't want to do that right now. But I do want to get the thumb moving if possible. Then there was an issue with this servo pulley. I snapped one of the screws off, so we just need to get a replacement for that servo pulley, and we should be able to get the thumb working. We've got to print the covers for the hand as well. And there is an issue with this cover going over here. Not quite sure where it is at the moment. It might be in this drawer. Yes, it is. Yeah, small issue with this. When I fit it on, it's not quite going down properly. It's kind of it won't fully close up, and I believe the reason is one of these reinforcing sort of strips is hitting the top of one of the servo horns. So I think we need to cut a section out. I think it's this one. I think we just need to chop a small section out from here. It shouldn't be too difficult if we just carefully chop a piece off with the Dremel. just to clear these servo horns. I'm not sure exactly where it's hitting now, but I did have a look in there. It's hitting the servo horn or this bracket or something. What would that be? It's probably this servo horn here. When I do it, I'll have a proper look and show you. So a little bit of rework to that, and then we can get that screwed on. We kind of need that because it's part of the hinge mechanism for the elbow in this cover here. So this will attach into here on the bicep and create the movement. So we need the cover, and again, to be called complete, we need all the covers on. Finally, I'm going to need to do something with all the wiring, because I'm hoping at the end of the video we'll be able to have a little bit of a demonstration of the entire arm moving. So here's the cover for the hand. They just fit on the back of the hand like this. I'm finding if I line up the front hole here, that the two at the back don't quite line up. They're about like half a hole out. They're fairly close, but just not quite there. And the same with this one. You get one to line up, the other one's like half a hole out. These print as one, and you can either print them flat on the bed, which is what I've done, or you can actually print them standing upright like that. There's two options. I think standing up gives you a slightly better quality finish. These kind of, when you lay them down, they kind of get like a wood grain effect finish on them. That's just the way the layers are built up in the 3D print. I printed them flat because I think that's a bit safer. I think if I'd printed them vertical, probably would have took a bit longer, and there's a risk that they could sort of come away from the bed, get knocked over, and come away from the bed. So I thought it'd be safer just to print them flat. This piece here broke away really easily, snapped off there. These are a little bit more solid, these two parts. I believe they need to be separated, so I'm just going to run a knife through this joint. I think you could just snap them off, but I just want to be a little bit safe, don't want to damage anything. So I'm just going to run a knife through that, and then I'll open up all the holes just a tiny little bit. So I'm using these number 4 by 1/4 inch screws. They're quite small. The head of the screw seems to fit almost perfectly into the larger clearance holes on these covers. I screwed this one straight in, but on these two here I've actually just cleared out that hole as well. I believe that was a 2mm drill, but this is 2. Yeah, that was with a 2mm drill bit. There we go. I just literally went through that, holding the drill bit with my hand. This is quite a thin shell, so it doesn't take much to go through it. I've popped this one in and this one in. I found that this was just ever so slightly sticking, so you might just want to file away a little bit in here and a little bit down there, just barely nothing, but they just were sticking just ever so slightly. They're pretty much a perfect fit. So I've just got to pop this one on. Again, it looks like it's going to be very tight up against this one, so I might just file these edges a little bit. I think for these two holes back here, I want to leave them. I wanted to get these two bits in first, so I can then just play around with the movement on this piece. I think once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to run the drill through here and here, because you can see the holes aren't really lining up. Okay, so they're on. I did just run through these 2 holes with a 2mm drill with a power drill. You just need to go really slow and be careful, because it will go in there really easily, and you don't want to pop out the other side. But because they weren't quite lining up, I did just run the drill through. I really like these. They look really nice. There isn't much movement on these, and they do feel a little tight. I don't think that's down to the covers. I think that's more to the hand parts themselves. You don't get a lot of movement there. It's just very subtle. I don't know if that's going to impede on the operation of the fingers. I guess we'll find out when we get operational again. But they are really nice looking covers. I think Gael does a really fantastic job of sculpting the parts. Yeah, they are really nice. You got the word InMoov kind of stamped into them as well. Really pleased with those. So I've got the thumb operational. This is actually quite a fairly good demonstration of the knot slipping. If you watch it when it comes up, you see the knot moving across. Okay. See the knot moving from one side to the other. We need to solve that. We need that knot glued down in the middle. And we need to do that for every finger. I've noticed I can't move these knots. They're stuck on the outside. I think that's because the fingers are in the open position. So I think we want all the servos moved back to their center positions. I've reloaded the original setup sketch that I did onto the Arduino, so we can actually work through the servos one at a time, put them all in their center positions, and glue their knots in place. I think what I'm going to have to do then, once the knots are glued in place, is just leave that glue overnight to give it a real good chance to set. Once we're happy that the glue is set, once I'm happy that the glue is set and it's actually worked, then we can re-tighten all the servos. It'll be the final tightening before we put the cover over the top. Finger covers. So there's 5, obviously. 2 of them seem to have a sort of a chamfered angle on the bottom, and 2 of them seem to have fairly flat bottoms on them. And the 2 that with the flat bottoms, one seems just a little larger than the other. So I'm assuming they go in this order. The small one with the chamfer being the pinky, and then the next one with the chamfer is the next finger along, and then you got the large finger here in the middle, and then the index finger here. I presume that's how they go. And then this one is the thumb. Now the thumb is giving me a little bit of confusion. There's a hole in the thumb here, and there's a hole there in the cover, so that must go over there. But it doesn't sit flat at all, so I'm really confused by that. It can't go any other way around. It must go that way round. But it doesn't sit flat at all. There's a flat bottom on this, and part of the thumb is flat, but there's a big raised piece here. So the only thing I can think to do with that is I need to grind this piece down until it's flat. That seems quite a large modification, so I'm a little bit worried I've done something wrong here. I'll see if I can find anything about that online, but that is really confusing me. This one's different to all the others. All the others actually glue onto the fingers, and they move with the fingers. They don't glue onto these small pieces here, which is part of the hand, which stays stationary. They glue onto the fingers and move. The thumb is different. The thumb seems to actually fix onto the hand and just it'll just stay stationary. It isn't attached to the thumb like the other ones are. I find that a little bit odd. I'm not quite sure why that is that big. Looks a little strange. I'll see if I can find some photos online of that before I do that one, but I think we're ready. We can glue these on. I did print these with support material if anyone's interested in it. They're a little messy underneath, but we're not going to see that because we're going to glue them on. I did think this one looks kind of perfect. I think the big ones are going to work out okay. This one here should be fine. Dropped one. Yeah, I knew they were going to fall off. They're never going to stay on there, were they? This second one in, it seems like the angle is wrong. Doesn't seem to have quite enough chamfer on it. It looks like it should be sort of in that position, but then it wouldn't be straight on the finger. So I think that one's going to have a little gap sort of here. We can have it touching at the top, and then there's a little gap at the bottom. I believe they're supposed to touch when they're in the closed positions. I believe they're supposed to be kind of a stop to stop the finger from actually lifting up too far. Although my fingers don't seem to lift up too far anyway. So they all look good apart from this one. Seems to not quite fit so well. Angle seems to be a little bit wrong on that one. I have just filed this edge down a bit to try and improve it a little bit, and I might give this edge a little file as well, see if that would slightly improve it, but that's kind of how it is at the moment. It's not too bad, but seems a little bit like it's the wrong angle, just ever so slightly. The other thing I did on these, just before I glue them on, I don't know if you can see, but I've just chamfered the edges off. I've just taken the sharp edge off the end of the hand. I was a little unsure of when I glue these on, whether they're going to catch on that sharp edge and lift up a little bit. So just to be on the safe side, I've chamfered mine off. Kind of just tried to round them off a little bit. So I didn't check this in the end, I just went ahead. I made two slight modifications. I've flattened off this area here. Don't know if you can kind of see that, it looks a little messy, but it's just basically cut a line across there and then just filed it flat down there. And then on this piece, very, very carefully with a cutting wheel on a Dremel, I've just cut this flat piece at the top, I've just cut it back a bit. So we end up with kind of the rounded shape to go around the high part of the thumb. So I kind of modified both pieces just a little bit. And then that should enable me to screw that on there now. So that's all the finger covers in place. I was starting to think this bit here not lining up might be just the finger. It's got a little bit of play in it. If you pull the finger more this way, it seems to line up fairly well. So maybe it's just that the finger's got a bit more play than it really should have. The others have got a little bit, but yeah. Okay, so I think all we've really got left to do on the hand now is the fingertips. So here are all the fingertips. I managed to find them all. They could do with a little bit better paint job, but I'm just going to carry on and get them stuck on. Don't want to hold myself up. So I think I've just got to trim off the excess cable off the ends. They are hollow, so they can take the knot okay. But you probably do just want to trim the cables a little bit. I think I know where everyone goes. They're all different sizes. The index and the ring finger are very similar in size, but hopefully when I put them on I'll be able to figure it out. And there it is, the hand is now finished. I've got all the covers on and all the fingertips glued in place. So we're ready to start moving up the arm. The next thing to do is to try and sort out the cabling. I've got all the servo wires coming down to my little board here. I've now got an extra header on that board for a ribbon cable to connect into. We've got a power cable coming into the blue screw terminals. And then my plan is to try and get this to fit. It's kind of down into the wrist area, down in here somewhere. So I've tucked my power cable and ribbon cable down there first. So they're running down that side and out the back, and they're coming out through that rectangular hole at the back. So they're the only cables that are going to be coming out. And that's kind of left me with the servo cables kind of all here, and the circuit board down there. It's just going to sit in there. I'm not going to fix it in anyhow. I'm going to try and just tidy these cables up a bit. I don't want to use any cable ties or anything unless I really have to, but I still want it to be reasonably neat. So I'm fairly happy with that. I managed to just tuck all the cables down the side there. They're not particularly tidy, but they're not going to get in the way or anything. We're going to put a cover over this whole thing anyway. And the board's just now sitting there on its side down in there. Again, doesn't look particularly tidy, but when we get the cover on, we're not going to see any of that. So I think what I'll do now is just do like a final tightening of all the servos, just make sure everything is still working. Make sure the circuit board is all connected up and working properly, and all the cables got a nice tension on them before we fit the cover over the top. So I've tightened up all the servos, all the tendons on the servos, so I'm going to fit this cover now. I said earlier that it was hitting a little bit inside and it wouldn't quite close up, but now I've come to fit it, it actually isn't that bad. There's only a small gap here. I think it possibly is just touching something inside there. Somewhere in the middle here, I think. So I'm going to make an attempt at connecting the forearm to the bicep. So the way we want to do this is to set this gear all the way in the anti-clockwise position, and then just a tiny movement back clockwise again. And we want to try and connect the elbow on whilst the arm's in the straight position. It's not quite 100% straight because that's as far as it will go. So we're aiming to have no gap in this section here, whilst this gear is in almost the fully anti-clockwise position. And then we tilt the arm upwards until the elbow joint meets in that hole there. Okay, so I've put the bolt in there. I still think this is a little bit too tight in here, in this joint here. I did file out the insides of these and the outsides of the piece on the bicep, but it still felt a little bit tight putting that in there. I'm not going to put the nut on the back just yet because I might take it out. If it is too tight, I'll have to take it out and file it down a bit. And you can just see the other M8 bolt coming through there. I haven't put the nut on that either. I've got the ribbon cable and power cable coming out of the forearm in the rectangular slot here, which is kind of at the front of the arm, and I'm then taking them through back to the back of the bicep, and we'll run them up the back of the bicep. I don't think there's any cover that goes on the back. I think you get covers for the sides and the front. I don't think there's no cover that's been designed for the back, so we should have no problems running cables up there like that. So we're starting to see the whole arm come together now. So I promised you covers, and here they are. This is arm top cover 1. This is straight how it comes off the printer. We'll need to remove the brim and just separate the parts, and then we just clean up the edges with a Stanley knife. So this one is a little tricky to get apart. I'm just cutting through this section here. There's also a little join down the middle that you have to cut through. There, that's finally separated. You will need to just clean up these a little bit with a file. This piece here. I've cleaned them up, and then we just need to glue the two halves together. So they're now glued together. That's arm top cover 1. And this is arm top cover 2. I've just glued the two halves of that together. And then finally we've got arm top cover 3. So you have this sort of curved notch in one end, and then this sort of flat lip at this end on each side. So I'll just glue those. So there's all the bicep covers done. Getting quite excited now about putting this all together. It's all starting to really come together now. So we'll put these to one side and we'll use those later. So one last problem we need to solve on this bicep is these screws here. I believe if we can look down there, you can see those screws just in there. I think they're too long and they're catching on the piston as it's running through. And now I think the reason they're too long is because I didn't fit these reinforcing strips that should have gone in here. So that screw that's down there should have actually gone through this piece here. So I'm going to take that screw out, fit this reinforcing strip, put the screw back in. The screw might then be too short, but we'll take a look at that now. I've had to order some longer screws for the bicep, so whilst I wait for those to be delivered, I'm going to turn my attention back to the shoulder. I've taken the shoulder out of the chest so that I can have a look at this potentiometer down in here. So I've fitted this plate in there with the round piece with the square hole in, and I've pushed the potentiometer down in there. I believe you're supposed to tip this slightly at an angle. I've got it in straight at the moment, so it's more or less pointing straight out the side. I'm not sure, but I believe the reason for tipping it slightly is so that you can have a little bit of backwards movement on the arm. I need to just double check that. I'm also not sure exactly where I should route this cable. So this is the servo at the back here. There's a potentiometer for that. I've got that just going around there, but I'm not sure if that's the correct routing. I did wonder if I'm supposed to go through this gap here. I'm really not sure where the cables are supposed to go, so I think I'm going to put it back into the chest to see where the best route is for these cables. Before I do that, I'm just taking a quick look at this part here for the potentiometer on the back. It has a little space in there to retain the nut, but if you push this part in first, you won't be able to get the nut in afterwards. So I think we need to get the nut kind of in there as we're putting it in. So that part is in there now, and you can see the nut is inside there. That's an M8 nylock nut. So I'm reinstalling the shoulder, and I can see a potential problem. I said I wasn't sure about the way we route this cable down into that potentiometer. We can't see that now because it's on the inside. It's just down there somewhere. I don't think we can route it through this slot here, because when this closes in, that would actually trap the cable, so we can't go in through that way. So I think the correct route is probably through this hole here in the back, but my cable's too short. I did try rerouting it through there, and it's too short. It's even a little bit tight where we've got it now. I was thinking that it would sit up on the top of the shoulder, but it's even too tight for that. So it kind of has to sit out here for now. I think we'll just about get away with that, but long term I probably will undo this connection here and put a longer cable on and route it through this hole here. But I think we'll just about get away with that at the moment. So I'll run this bolt back through here. So that works surprisingly well. I just put this screw back in with an Allen key, this bolt running through here, and I was interested to see what was going to happen when it reached the nut, and it did start to push the nut out. So I just held the nut back by wedging my file in there, and just continued to screw the bolt in, and it did find its way into the nut really easily. And I just sort of stopped it when the cap of the bolt touched this grey plastic plate. We don't want this over tightened. It is a nylock nut, so hopefully it won't come loose, and it's also kind of retained in that plastic part, although I think technically the bolt still could unwind. It's very unlikely that would happen though. So I don't think we don't need to crank this up really tight. I probably should have installed the rest of the shoulder before I put it back in, so I might end up taking it off again. I'll see if I can install this part in situ. If not, we'll have to have it out again. So the next stage is to look at this, the next potentiometer on the back here. I think we've got a couple more parts. We've got this part here. So I will confess I haven't properly looked at the tutorials for this, so I'm not entirely sure how they go, but it looks like it fits in there, although it seems a little tight to go in there. Does appear to be where it goes. I assume these two holes line up with these two screws here, so I'll have to take these two screws out, possibly find some longer screws and screw that back in. It is a little odd because it seems the gap is too small for this to fit in there. Unless it goes that way, but no, it doesn't line up with the potentiometer then. It must go in that way. I'll just have a fiddle around and see if I can make that fit in there. Yeah, okay, this is looking a little bit better now. I've laid him down on his front. And then we can just pop this part in here. It does seem that gap does seem too small, but as you can quite easily just push that in there. So it is touching in there, but I guess it will just roll around the circular part. And that all seems to line up nicely there. It's lining up with the potentiometer hole. Probably about there somewhere. So I think the thing to do is to get these screws out and get some longer ones in there. So the screws I'm taking out are these smaller ones. They're number 6 by 1/2 inch, and the ones I'm going to replace them with are number 6 by 3/4 inch. So I'm not going to over tighten them. Then we have this little adapter plate, this little circle piece, whatever you call that. This is quite loose fitting, this one. The other one we just did was quite tight. This one's quite loose, so I'm definitely going to require some hot melt glue to stick this one in. I guess the potentiometer itself will hold it a little bit. And again, I haven't checked the tutorial, so I don't know how we set this up. So that will be for this servo down inside the chest. Here he is. Okay, so that's in there, but it's not set up. However, this will rotate, so I guess we could set that up later. We've got good access to the back of the robot, so we should be able to set that up later. So I'm just installing these reinforcing strips. I got some longer screws. These are 30mm long now, M3 by 30. They seem perfect, they're perfect length. So I'll just pop that one in there. This is the second one, so I've got them both on. I just put a little bit of super glue here, here, and here. So I'm getting all excited and I'm trying to fit these bicep covers because I think they're going to look really cool when I get these on here. And I'm struggling a bit with this back one. They kind of slot into this reinforcing strip down here. They slot into there on the other side, and then there's a couple of. If I show you one of the other ones, they've kind of got these angled pieces that kind of slot into the holes in these pieces on that side. It's really quite difficult to show you this, but there's a piece on the other side that is just not lining up. I can try and turn it over. Okay, so we're kind of looking through the bicep here. This is the piece I'm having trouble with. The white piece with this angled line here is the bicep cover, and it's hitting the grey section here. And I thought perhaps we need to try and get the bicep cover a bit higher to clear that. But the thing is, it has to line up with this slot here on the other side, of course. And if we raise it up, then we're too high to slot into that slot there. So this seems to be the correct height. So what I'm thinking I'm going to have to do is just cut a little section off. So I might see if I can get a pencil or something and just mark it, and then I'll see how much needs to be removed. So I marked it with a pencil, and looks like I need to just cut across that line there and just remove that tiny little bit. So after that little modification, it does fit quite well. You kind of have to get this slot in here first, and then just push down on this area, and that just snaps in quite easily. And then at this end you have to kind of locate the lug that's kind of behind here in this position. There's a little gap at the back here, and that's just because that locating lug that's somewhere in here, it hasn't gone all the way in. You can just see it in there. So maybe a little bit of filing and that would sit a bit flatter. I did notice, I had a look back at one of Gael's really old videos on his when he originally designed this, and he mentioned about gluing these back covers on to give the arm a little bit more strength. I'd rather not glue them on, but we could do if we can't get that to fit a little bit nicer than that. Possibly, I don't believe there are any rear covers, but possibly if a rear cover was to slot over the top, it would kind of hold that in, and possibly that rear cover could then screw into these sort of frame pieces. But anyway, that's just an idea for the future. So that one's on. The next one to go on is this front one. I have been playing around with this one as well. I filed out that slot there, and that's kind of a nice fit in there now. But this is sort of very tricky. There's two lugs on this one to line up. There's two lugs here and here. I have to line up with these two holes, and I've had to do quite a bit of filing on those to try and make that line up. It's nearly there. It's just a bit of fiddling. So they're all on, looking good now. So this is pretty much the whole arm finished. I just need to sort of turn my attention to the shoulder up here. The final step really is to get this shoulder all assembled. So I'm looking at this section here, which has got the main shoulder brackets on it, and I've realised that you need to fit these brackets onto this cover before you fit this cover, because you can't clear the servo horn whilst the cover's fitted. So I'm going to have to just remove the cover, get it attached to this, and then refit the cover. Okay, so what I've managed to do is attach this piece onto this piece, and then attach that assembly onto this piece here that's marked top. I think the way that you're supposed to do these, I keep deviating from the tutorial, which is probably where I'm going wrong. I think you need to kind of get the two pieces aligned, and then push these sections on afterwards. So I have managed to get the second one on. That was quite tricky, trying to get all four dovetail joints lined up, and one of them did. Sorry, I'm showing you the wrong side. This is the second one I did. One of them did crack down here, but because of the nature of the joint, I think it's actually compressing it back in, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. Now we've got those on, I believe we can glue on these My Robot Lab covers. They do go on a certain way, that way I believe. The word top in there should be the top of your My Robot Lab logo. I couldn't really decide what was the best way to put this together. It looked like it was all going to get a bit tricky with the arm being so heavy. So what I've done is I've actually taken the shoulder back out of the robot, and now that I've got this assembly here separately, I'm going to try and connect these two sections together. And it looks like it's fairly simple, although I imagine it's going to be a little tricky. That just slots in there. Then we have these two screws. They need to come out of there. Slot this on, and then they go. Those two screws can go back in. Of course, we need to fit the ball bearings in there as well whilst we connect that together. And then finally, just two securing screws, one through here and one in the opposite side around the back. So these holes here are slotted, so the whole thing can be raised or lowered depending on how much pressure you put onto these two screws. And then once you've got your pressure set where you want it, you can just tighten up these screws and the one on the other side to hold the whole thing in place. I've just done mine, so I'm just putting a small amount of pressure down onto the ball bearings. I don't want it too tight, I don't want the servos working too hard. So I'm ready to install the bicep back onto the shoulder. That will just fit on there, and we'll just screw it in through here. I believe there's 4 screws in there. There's 3 screws, and I've got a feeling I can't get to the 4th one. So I think the idea is that you should attach your bicep to this plate here first, and then connect in your joint here. I didn't really want to do it that way because there's ball bearings in this joint. You really want to be doing that sort of standing upright so the ball bearings don't fall out everywhere. There is another joint here as well you could connect last, but again it's got ball bearings in, so I thought this was going to be a good idea, but we can't get to the screw that goes through here, and you can see we've got a small gap there. Now what I'm wondering is whether I can go in from the bottom. If this screw is just long enough to reach past the joint, if it will just bite into this piece, I might be able to screw in this way. Just get that screw in there. It's not really the correct type of screw, it's a machine screw, but they do tend to bite into the plastic, so it might work. Okay, I've driven the screw in there. It's down in there. It's gone all the way in, but it didn't close the gap up, so see we've still got a gap here. It's not really a good enough solution. I think I'm going to have to dismantle this joint, but really don't want to do that right now. I'm going to wing it and see if we can get away with that for now. We'll need to come back and relook at the shoulder. It was getting a bit cumbersome, so I've made him a new frame. The previous one I built was just nowhere near strong enough, so hopefully this one will be a little bit more substantial. I just need to reattach the forearm and then we can wire him up. So the arm's all fully on. We haven't got the potentiometer set up, so I'm just moving things manually at the moment. This cable here is causing me a problem. This is too short, and that's preventing me from going out too far with this arm. I get to about there and I'm stretching this cable here, so that will need to be sorted out. The arm is moving. And this one here is the rotation on the arm. You can go faster than that, I'm just being a little careful. It sounds like the servo motor is struggling. So this gap I had here because I assembled the arm on in the wrong order and I couldn't close up that gap. That's actually given me a problem because the potentiometer, when it fits down inside here, it's not reaching down into its locating hole, so the arm won't have any control, so that will need to be fixed. And there's the third movement in the shoulder. I'm not sure if that's called pivot. I think you have pivot, tilt and rotate. Not quite sure which is which. I did try the wrist, but the wrist is it seems disconnected, so that's not working properly. And I've tried the index finger. You can see that's why it's in that funny position. There are some small issues with the index finger, but it is basically working. Currently, I don't have any power going to the fingers. And the bicep was also moving okay as well. So I think everything's working apart from the wrist. Okay, that's about all I can show you for now. I can currently only move one servo at a time because I haven't really sorted out my power distribution yet. I need to get all the wires connected up and all the potentiometers set in their relevant positions. So maybe in the next video we'll take a look at that setup and see if we can get sort of all the motors moving together. Okay, sorry that was another bit of a long one again. I'll try and keep them a bit shorter in the future. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to build up my subscribers, so hit that subscribe button and leave comments. I need more comments. Can you tell me what you want to see me doing next? Do you want me to move on to the next arm, or is there something different you want to see? Should we go back to the head? Sort out the head and neck and eyes and maybe take a look at the jaw, or should we move down onto the stomach? So please give me some suggestions in the comments of where you want me to go next. Okay, thanks for watching and see you next time.